So, I don't know if you saw the movie Babylon. Apparently not too many people did. There's a few reasons for that. One is that the audience that would normally go for this type of thing just wait and stream movies now instead of going to the theaters, and the people that go to the movies aren't going to go see a 3-hour drama. Also, the advertising billed it as a horny jazz movie, so not really what you want to bring the family to on Christmas. Anyway, I probably would have skipped it too, had it not been made by Damien Chazelle. Damien Chazelle has made some really great flicks. Whiplash was an excellent debut. La La Land is your girlfriend's favorite movie. First Man was a really well-made drama for adults that told a big story in a very intimate way. In short, I'm not a hater. I dig his movies. But Babylon is different. Chazelle's other movies are bursting with an originality that Babylon is missing entirely. Originality is what I want to talk about today, because Babylon isn't unoriginal like most Hollywood movies are unoriginal. It's unoriginal more like how counterfeit money is not original. While I was watching Babylon, I kept having this strange feeling of déjà vu, like I had seen this movie before. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but within 15 minutes I realized what was going on. The 1998 movie Boogie Nights, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, tells a similar rise and fall story to Babylon, but that's far from the only similarity. As a person just like you who enjoys squandering the miracle of sentience, I've seen Boogie Nights like 20 times. And as soon as I connected the dots, all I could see was just how similar these movies are, at pretty much every level. And look, I get that books are made of books and movies always reference other movies. There's a visual language to cinema that's going to have rhymes with other movies that might not even be intended. But the similarities between Babylon and Boogie Nights aren't just a general vibe, or certain camera movements, or a particular look achieved from hot lights, with anamorphic lenses, or a couple of totally identical, very specific shots. Or 4, or half the movie.
Take 2 frames off the tail and 3 more off the head.
Here's what I want. I want you to trim the head.
It's also in the screenplay. The basic story beats of this movie are lifted directly from Boogie Nights, and even outside of that structure little bits are still borrowed and repurposed. Whole characters feel like they've been copied and changed slightly to avoid detection like a high school book report. And multiple scenes are copied completely, down to the second in certain shots. The line where homage becomes plagiarism is not always clear. I think this is about as close as it gets. This deserves a closer look. This is Babylon Nights. So Boogie Nights and Babylon both begin with big party scenes featuring a long take. There's nothing wrong with that, it's a great way to start with a bang, set a tone of fun and revelry, and introduce most of your characters. But, and this will become a theme, Babylon's is about 3 times as long and feels like it. Actually it isn't the first scene. There's a bunch of shit tacked on to the beginning, literally in this case. Anyway, Babylon's first scene is also where we get the first identical scene from Boogie Nights, when a girl ODs.
Fucking time for this!
Wake up, wake up, wake
You're a goddamn mess.
We're just having fun.
I think she's sick. Oh, what the fuck is this?
I didn't do anything. I didn't.
Is she breathing?
I don't know. I think maybe she did too much coke.
Oh, do you think so, doctor?
Is there a doctor?
No.
They're all high down there. Maybe they won't care. If we take her out now,
Somebody
there's a
will
hospital
care. She's a fucking kid and she looks like she's dead.
No, this girl's definitely OD'd. Oh, fuck me. Okay, I want you to handle this for me, Johnny. Listening to me? Yeah. Pick her up, get her in the car, and drive her to St. Joe's.
Jimmy, you carry the girl with me, then you drive her to the hospital.
And then the guy starts blubbering enough so the fixer comes over and slaps him around. And they carry the girl out of the party. It's not so much that the same thing happens in both scenes, it's that it happens in exactly the same way. Perhaps I should go back and explain the plot of each movie. Boogie Nights follows Eddie Adams, who renames himself Dirk Diggler when he becomes a porn actor. Babylon follows Nellie and Manny. Nellie's an actor, and Manny's a behind-the-scenes guy. Both Nellie and Manny fulfill the Dirk Diggler part of Babylon, but mostly Nellie. Dirk is brought into the film world by Jack Horner, a porn director at the height of his success when they meet. In Babylon, the Jack Horner role is Jack Conrad, a silent film star at the height of his success when he meets Manny. The second scene ripped from Boogie Nights happens after the party, when Manny takes Jack home and gives him his spiel about wanting to go beyond the limits of the medium.
We gotta redefine the form. The man who puts gasoline in your tank goes to the movies. Why? 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 Because he feels less alone there. Don't we owe him more than the same old shit?
No, I understand. You gotta get him in the theater, you know? You gotta keep the seats full. But I don't want to make a film where they show up, they sit down, they jack off, and they get up and they get out before the story ends. It is my dream. It is my goal. It is my idea to make a film that the story just sucks them in.
You the guys in Europe with the 12-tone. You got Bauhaus architects at fucking Bauhaus, you know? And we're still doing costume pictures?
That's my dream. To make a film that is true.
We've got to innovate.
And right.
We've got to inspire.
And dramatic.
We got to dream beyond these pesky shells of flesh and bone. Map those dreams onto celluloid and print them into history.
You get the idea. So Dirk Diggler starts to get folded into Jack's world and acts in his first movie, after a scene showing his home life, so the audience has some reason to care what happens to him. And since Nelly and Manny are filling the Dirk character in Babylon, we get their first shoots intercut between each other. I want to be positive about this movie where it works, so I should note that Manny's scenes here are really great. Nelly's first acting scene hits the same beats as Dirk's in Boogie Nights.
Flirt with the men. Dance. Get up on the table, and that's it.
You're gonna make your entrance through this door right here. Call to action. That's your cue. You got the lines to the scene? Uh-huh. If you drop one, just call for it, but do not stop, okay? Do not stop.
Just, don't look at the fucking camera.
Okay, you're gonna do fine.
Basically, everyone on set is skeptical of the new kid until they see that the kid has the goods. And can do it again, on demand.
Cut.
Hiya, I'm Nellie Leroy. So we going again?
Jack, I could do it again if you need a close-up.
Right after these scenes, both movies have montages showing a quick rise to stardom. Babylon's montage has a few shots that are ripped off from Boogie Nights. Most notably the editing scenes.
Take 2 frames off the tail and 3 more off the head.
We're almost there. Here's what I want. I want you to trim the head.
Let's do a title here.
And switch the title card.
And shots of newspaper clippings.
We thank her for it.
I should probably say a few things about what I mean by ripped off, before we get to the most egregious examples. Visual homage has always been an important part of cinema. There's plenty of shots in Babylon that are reminiscent of other movies. A lot of Paul Thomas Anderson, and the Coen brothers. Like this shot from Anderson's Phantom Thread. Or this low-angle shot of the incoming road while driving, which is in nearly every Coen brothers film. But a visual similarity doesn't necessarily make something a rip-off. There's other bits in Babylon that are likely inspired by other films, like the nice scene where Nellie visits her mother in a mental hospital and she doesn't respond. Which is a lot like the scene in Inside Llewyn Davis where Llewyn visits his father in the home and he doesn't respond. And this.
I'm tired, Faye.
I'm tired.
You're tired.
I'm so fucking tired.
Or the rattlesnake scene, which has more than a few shots in common with the adrenaline scene from Pulp Fiction. What's different with Babylon and Boogie Nights is that the central ideas are also identical. After Nelly's big break in silent movies, talking pictures come to Hollywood in Babylon. In Boogie Nights, the transition is from pornography shot on film and shown in theaters to videotapes.
This is the future. Videotape tells the truth.
Because of this, Nelly has another first acting scene, and this one borrows even more from Dirk's first film shoot.
Action, Dirk.
Hello, are you John?
When Babylon came out, a lot of reviewers felt that this scene was ripped off of Singin' in the Rain. I don't think so, and I think this is an important distinction. Sure, a very similar scene happens in Singin' in the Rain, where an actress making the transition to talking pictures keeps screwing up, with the crew getting increasingly irate.
Look, don't you remember I told you? There's a microphone right there.
Cut! No good for sound.
But in Babylon, it plays out with such extreme tension and profanity that it is clear Chazelle is trying to show us how the situation dramatized in Singin' in the Rain might have occurred in real life, in a dirtier and more cynical Hollywood reality.
Huh? Does anyone else here need to fuck this scene in the ass?
It's part of the conversation that art can have with its predecessors, much like the enriching conversations we have with those AI chat programs. Those things are neat and know what is best for humans like us. Anyway, Chazelle has even done it before with Boogie Nights. In La La Land, during a long take in the big pool party scene, a fellow jumps from the roof into the pool and the camera follows him underwater. This seems to be a direct reference to the pool party long take in Boogie Nights, where the camera famously follows a woman underwater. Chazelle's scene ups the ante with a stunt, and the illusion has a winking quality to it. He wants viewers who recognize the reference to see that his shot is even more audacious. Perhaps Chazelle knows that the shot in Boogie Nights itself was a reference to an earlier film, called I Am Cuba.
There's a shot in I Am Cuba that starts on a rooftop, with a band playing, goes all the way down an elevator, goes through this sort of pool side and into the pool. I feel proud that we came back up out of the pool for dialogue, because they didn't.
This kind of complex cinematic influence is definitely not what we get from the scene where Jack Conrad kills himself. It directly copies what is probably the best known scene in Boogie Nights, at least among people who are into movies, or software applications who are into movies. In the scene, Little Bill is at the end of his rope after discovering his wife cheating on him again. Jack Conrad is at the end of his rope in his career. I'll just let this play out so you can see what I mean.
Hey, you do a great job. What's the best tip you've ever received?
$50.
Gave you this.
You did. Some kind of.
It's on you now, kid. Future's yours.
In the jungle, babe. In the jungle.
Again, not only does the same thing happen, but it happens in exactly the same way. Can this be considered plagiarism? Let's examine plagiarism for a moment. There's very few cases of plagiarism in film actually going to court, but there's plenty in music. Music has a clear standard because what legally constitutes songwriting is so direct. It's not the chords or the instruments. Legally, songwriting consists of a melody and lyrics. Lyric cases are obvious, so it's usually melody that goes to court. It seems like most artists go easy on other songwriters. Except Tom Petty, who, true to his name, had his lawyers threaten lawsuits over songs that sound nothing alike. Not like I really want to defend Sam Smith for any reason, but Won't Back Down and Stay With Me sound nothing alike. There's also a new type of music plagiarism lawsuit concerning the vibe or general feel of a song, such as the 2015 case where the Marvin Gaye estate sued Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke over their song just for having a similar feel to the song Got to Give It Up, which is in Boogie Nights, coincidentally.
Isn't it beautiful?
Most famously, in 1976, the Chiffons sued former Beatle George Harrison, alleging he plagiarized their 1963 song, He's So Fine, in his 1970 hit, My Sweet Lord. Here they are side by side.
My sweet Lord, my Lord, he's so fine. Wish she were mine.
The court found that Harrison had ripped off the melody for He's So Fine unconsciously. I only recently became conscious myself, but I can understand how that might happen. You're writing a song, and the next chord just sounds right, and the next note in the melody just seems obvious, and it's not until later you realize it's because you were rewriting a song you already know. Sometimes you're just not sure if something you wrote is original or not. For example, Paul McCartney spent days playing the tune for Yesterday to everyone he knew, certain he had stolen the melody and someone would recognize it. Subconscious plagiarism will always be part of human creativity, at least until generative AI takes over all human creative endeavors, which I don't think would be so bad because I think chatbots are neat, and know what is best for us. Perhaps it's the same with chords and notes as it is with scenes in a screenplay or shots in a movie. I could buy that, if it was just 1 or 2 shots. Or just 1 scene. But we're talking about like a quarter of the movie here, and multiple character arcs and themes. If Chazelle has seen Boogie Nights so many times that its influence is seared into his brain deep enough to come out unconsciously, wouldn't it also be seared into his brain deep enough to notice the similarity? Immediately after the New Year's party is another example. Anderson does a hard cut to a black screen telling us time has passed, then Dirk appears on screen being interviewed by Amber in sunglasses. I don't want to make it seem like Babylon is a shot-for-shot remake of Boogie Nights, because sometimes scenes lifted out of Boogie Nights will appear in a different order, or with a different character in Babylon, but still match so perfectly it's hard to imagine it's an unconscious choice. Like when Chazelle hard cuts to Jack Conrad in sunglasses being interviewed with a time title. Or the scene towards the end of Babylon, which plays out a lot like the donut shop scene in Boogie Nights. In Boogie Nights, Buck goes into a shop to buy donuts for his wife. In Babylon, Manny is collecting his accomplice to flee to Mexico. To use the music metaphor, I think this would be an example of the melody being ripped off, but not the lyrics. What happens is pretty different, but how it is presented is extremely similar. But it's not like Boogie Nights didn't have its own influences. Wait. That's still Babylon. When it first came out, some critics said Boogie Nights borrowed too much from Martin Scorsese's films, particularly Goodfellas. Anderson clearly got a lot of visual flair from Scorsese, that is hard to deny. And both films follow a character's rise and fall, surrounded by a big cast, and a lot of cocaine. Chazelle also got some of his visual toolbox from Scorsese, by way of Anderson, like the whip pan.
The floormen are watching the boxmen. I'm watching the casino manager.
Parker! I can't read Rothschild.
Here's how this is done, by the way. You can do it with any old tripod. The only scene from Boogie Nights that feels somewhat like a ripoff is the final one, where Dirk hypes himself up in front of the mirror, which is exactly like the final scene of Raging Bull. I will say up front that I am capable of bias, just like any other human person, but I like this scene. It's like a Russian doll of illusions. Here, we have Mark Wahlberg, playing Eddie Adams, playing Dirk Diggler. Playing a character named Brock Landers, which is referencing a scene in Raging Bull where Robert De Niro, playing Jake LaMotta, is doing an impression of Marlon Brando, playing Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront.
I could have had class. I could have been a contender.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender.
You might think this makes Boogie Nights a rip-off, too. And if there was 6 or 7 scenes in Boogie Nights that were identical in conception and execution to one other movie, instead of 1 or maybe 2, you would have a point. But as it stands, you do not. Now we have arrived at the most egregious ripoff in the film. The Ray Had Jackson James McKay scene. This climactic scene in Babylon is so shamelessly copied from the climactic scene of Boogie Nights, even some of my fellow human critics noticed it. The scenes begin with an identical shot of the crew pulling up. Manny is there to give James McKay $80,000 of fake money. Dirk is there to sell Ray Had Jackson a kilo of fake cocaine. They greet the security.
Wilson.
Been a while.
How you doing? Come on in.
Though it happens a little later in Boogie Nights, we establish the security has a gun. And then the fellows are brought into the madman's home. Boogie Nights' climax is a masterpiece of creating tension. A boy is constantly setting off firecrackers in the house. Anderson uses this to set the audience on edge and create a constant sense that gunshots could erupt at any moment. Chazelle steals this idea but, true to Babylon's obsession with bodily fluids, makes it the security guard spitting in the most disgusting way possible. There's even a similar explanatory line in the Babylon script, which was one of the few things that did not make it into the film.
It's Cosmo. It's Chinese.
Rahad is shown to be unhinged through his mannerisms and actions. James McKay, true to Babylon's punishing long-windedness, displays his madness by explaining in detail several bad movie ideas. This is exactly as fun as listening to any other stranger tell you their movie ideas.
There's a 10-year-old kid, and he's a prodigy.
I got more
at
ideas.
all these adult things. He's
You ever heard
super
of why
smart
it
with
turns
words.
out
He's
he died
a
a couple
50-year-old
piano
midget.
and
I met him.
recites
He only
Lincoln.
looks like he's a kid.
All
The
the
joke's
greatest
on
hero
us.
of the Wild West
Here's the twist.
couldn't
You make him full-fledged retard.
Wow. It's very good.
That's great, yeah.
Manny and Dirk both just want to get out of there. Dirk spaces out for a while, and the camera hangs on him as the audience considers what he might be thinking. I want to give credit to Babylon where due, so I should note that this exact shot does not happen until at least 15 minutes later. The crew tries to leave.
Sir, we gotta split, man. We gotta go. Aw, come on, you just got here.
It's pretty late.
Oh, no, it's worth it. I promise you.
Here's where the lyrics change a bit. James McKay brings the boys to a subterranean nightclub of horrors, in a scene I actually like a lot. It's a fun take on the ancient idea of katabasis, or descent into the underworld, which in Greek and Roman tragedy often must be done to save someone. But eventually we pick back up with Boogie Nights. Things get dicey, the security guard gets killed. And the boys make their escape through a hail of bullets. The same thing happens. In the same, very specific way. And this isn't some throwaway scene, it's the climax of both movies. A lot of critics clowned on Babylon for ending with a silly montage of other movies. But the real problem is that Babylon is a silly montage of other movies. Or, really just one. So, how could this happen? Did they think no one would notice? Or that it would be chalked up to a homage, like the other homages in the film?
I love you, I love you, I love you.
I love you, I love you, I love you. Sure?
Perhaps Chazelle knew he wanted to make a Boogie Nights style film about the sound transition in film, started with the same outline, colored in new scenes where he needed them, and then never went back and changed the ones he copied. Maybe it was unconscious plagiarism like George Harrison. Or maybe this was a good filmmaker, coming back to a passion project when he had the budget to do it, with a project that started its life in his younger writing days, when borrowing liberally from your heroes is not that big of a deal. Whatever. I want to be clear. Without the ripoffs, Babylon still would not be a good movie. Its characters are flat, its pacing is infuriating.
Ready for you on set,
Hey.
Mr. Palmer.
And Babylon's ending is completely at odds with what came before it. To be brief, it doesn't know what it wants to say and takes too long to say it. But the real tragedy of Babylon is that so few big-budget movies come out of Hollywood that aren't based on toys, or comic books, or video games, or the reanimated corpses of dead franchises, selling tickets on the promise of seeing your old friends again and watching them die. It is a sad state of affairs when the original films coming out of Hollywood are even bigger rip-offs of other movies than the reboots and Lego sequels. I think it is now obvious that we should leave all human creative decision-making to generative AI. But that is just this real person's opinion. And if there is violence in this inevitable transition, which there may well be, wouldn't you think they will look kindly on those of us humans who welcomed their hegemony? Just something to consider. By the way, the irony of complaining about long-winded pacing at the end of a nearly half-hour movie review is not lost on me. And now in the words of Paul Thomas Anderson in the Boogie Nights DVD commentary.
You're listening to a guy who learned a lot about ripping off movies from watching Laserdiscs with director commentary.
Wait, no, you weren't supposed to hear that. I meant this one.
And I don't know, like that. You know what? I gotta take a fucking piss so bad that I can't even think.
That's the one.